Welcome to the Next Gen Environmental Firm, the podcast where we speak with leaders building the future of environmental and sustainability-driven businesses. Today, I am talking to Joseph Cimorelli, Chief Operating Officer at ERS International, a company working at the intersection of electronic recycling, IT assess deposition, plastic recovery, carbon credits, and circular innovation. Welcome, Joseph.
Thank you, Jolanta, for having me today. Appreciate it.
I'm looking forward for our conversation. As I mentioned, I was looking at facts. And before we start dive in, I would like to get your perspective as well. So fact number one, global e-waste weighs the equivalent of about 125,000 Boeing 747 jumbo jets per year.
Yeah.
When you hear numbers like that, what do you think people still misunderstanding about e-waste?
I think, like you're saying, the magnitude of it, and it's something that is generated annually. And it's not like, that metric is, a historical throughout history. It is something, again, that is every year that amount of waste is generated, and it's only continuing to grow. In the world of e-waste and consumables with consumer electronics, rather, the companies are constantly innovating and always looking for the next gen laptop, cell phone, desktop, monitor. Now with, the boom in AI, data centers, GPUs, servers, et cetera, all of that equipment gets turned over 2-4 years. And you're seeing that generation increase with the amount of people who are using those devices. So yes, I'm aware of those numbers, and at ERS we tackle a small percentage of that, even though it's a large volume. In the big scheme of things, it's still a small percentage of what's actually generated globally.
Well, exactly. And actually, another fact is only about 17 to 20% of global e-waste is formally recycled.
Yes.
From your perspective, what is the biggest reason so much value is still being lost?
Well, you know what? It's actually, I guess, knowledge, the consumer knowledge, and knowing where to bring the devices at scale. We work with a lot of big corporations, and they know how to handle their waste. It's your retailers who, you might have 3 or 4 old gen cell phones that you don't know what to do with, that might be sitting in your house. That's probably a percentage of that volume. But I think the biggest challenge is actually the collection of the material, and really avoiding landfill, making sure everything is accountable, having a full stream documented from collection to final disposition, but really understanding as a consumer what to do with those electronics, I think is critical.
Oh, I agree. Absolutely agree. And I have myself guilty. I have like 2 mobile phones, which I, still in the drawer, and I don't know where to put them, right?
Right.
That is the biggest question, right? Well, moving to another step, and the fact that electronics recycling is now a multi-billion-dollar global industry. Do you feel the industry is now moving from waste management into something much more strategic, almost like circular infrastructure?
100%. And the biggest thing in our industry is commodity recovery. So, electronics have a lot of various metals and commodities that are attached or manufactured with them. And in our industry, obviously it's a volume industry, as you mentioned. If you can recover those resources, re-implement them back into the supply chain, you don't have a need to either manufacture from new or extract from the earth. So critical minerals, metals, et cetera. I mean, the industry has been like that for some time, but it is growing because the volume is growing. And, of trying to avoid having to extract resources from the earth because they're already in these devices. They're in the circuit boards, they're in the casings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's our job as an electronics recycling company to extract that, reintroduce it into the supply chain so that we don't have to rely on, extracting them from the earth.
That's brilliant. Now let's talk a bit about ERS International. So for listeners who are new to ERS International, how would you explain what the company does in very simple ways?
We'll go super high level. We are obviously an electronics recycling company, and we also do IT asset disposition, which we like to call technology lifecycle management, where we take on devices that may still have some life left in them and breathe them new life through refurbishment, repair, testing, grading, et cetera, under the R2v3 standard. And then on the electronics recycling front, we extract critical resources, various metals, chips, RAM, et cetera, devices, and reintroduce them back into the supply chain. We're a global electronics recycling company, so we do have a location in Toronto, one in Brazil, Germany, and Oman, and we have hub sites across Canada. So our business is reliant on our customers and people who are utilizing our service, companies that are utilizing our service, where the volume is. So we've historically expanded to different locations based on customer demand, and where we can see that, maybe there's some pain points in this region with respect to collection or processing, and then strategically set up facilities for recycling in those regions. But yeah, we've been in business for 24 years now, and the company's grown. We're continuing to innovate and, be a leader in our industry.
So you just mentioned, so ERS has been around for more than 24 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
What has changed the most since the company started?
Well, I've been with the company coming on 10 years, but from what I've heard previous to my time and speaking with the owner of ERS, the biggest change has been that a lot of people realize that this market is massive, and there are a lot of new companies popping up every single day. We were one of three in the world, top three in the world, and the industry has grown. And I think that's a great thing. I think you need more people in the space because of that stat that you mentioned earlier, where only 17 to 20% of global e-waste is actually getting recycled. It's because you need the reach, right? And the more companies you have doing it, the better. I think that would be the biggest change. I think the innovation technology into the processes is another big one. Regulation has become stricter. I think that's better for the industry with now the introduction of EPR programs in different regions. It's putting the onus on the producer now and the responsibility on the producer to make sure they're tracking and managing their volumes in every region where they operate. I think that's, we've seen that evolve. And yeah, like the introduction and integration of technology in the recycling stream with respect to AI identification systems, which we can speak about a little bit later. But yeah, I would say that those would be like the biggest changes that we've heard and seen.
So in your position, so how does your day-to-day look like, operating and managing this business?
Every day is kind of a different challenge because it depends on, what's coming through the door and what the customer requirement is. So for me, overseeing multiple accounts throughout the facility, managing staff, and then, making sure that we're operating efficiently throughout all of our locations. It's always fun. It is challenging, and every day brings in something new and exciting.
Yeah, so let's follow up on this matter. So on your website, ERS International talks about electronic recycling, technology lifecycle management, data destruction, product destruction, producer responsibility, OEM returns, and e-carbon programs. That's a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
That is a broad set of services. How do all pieces fit together?
So some of them actually, they're multi-layered. So, one customer may have electronics to recycle and refurbish. So those two could be integrated, but they're two separate streams. So one customer may have a lot of material that we would audit, test, and see which ones still have life in them, and then introduce those into our technology lifecycle management, IT asset disposition, where we test refurbished grade, data wipe any data containing material, and then whatever is not salvageable, it has to fit a certain metric, at least in the secondary markets, to see if we can generate value or extend the life because of what the demand is asking for. And basically, whatever is left that is not introduced into the ITAD will be for resource recovery, which is recycling. And then product destruction is another solution that we offer for customer returns. So we have customers in our industry that require either customer returns, overstock, expired devices, et cetera. We take them in and it's full resource recovery. So we do a lot of shredding. There's, plastics generation, there's metals, and so on. With respect to our EPR, our pro service, as I touched on earlier, there's regions throughout the world that have introduced producer responsibility programs where we partner with big corporations who have a weight target that they have to recycle a certain percentage of what they sell in a certain market, which is determined between the producer and the EPR program, usually overseen by government entities, or it could be a private entity. Like in Ontario, we have the RPRA program. And what that does is they basically partner with ERS, and we process whatever volume they have required to report on their behalf. Sometimes we collect volume from them. We have different sites across Ontario where consumers can go and drop off, various electronics, and then we can collect them and basically contribute it to those weight targets that we're trying to hit on an annual basis. And then we report directly to the RPRA. And then with carbon credits, that was something we introduced probably about 5 years ago now, because we saw our customers looking for sustainability metrics. And beyond that, a lot of people in our industry claim to have carbon offsets and reductions and credits and so on just by utilizing refurbishment as a metric without really having the backing or the data to really verify what they're claiming. So we introduced our eCarbon program where we generate a GHG report annually based off of both recycling and refurbishment through the WARM methodology and there's the CDM methodology. And we basically utilize those two methodologies to quantify what our carbon credits generated annually. And we utilize a registry here in Canada, which basically is submitted through the registry. Everything has a paper trail. Our GHG report is verified by a third party that was approved by CSA. And then they do their own verification of all of the data that we submit, and then they issue us the credits. But all of that is done basically under a microscope and audited over the course of 6 months. Every year we do it, just to showcase that what we're claiming is 100% accurate because it's been verified and audited by multiple parties. So rather than just saying, okay, we reused 50,000 laptops and we've generated this amount. Well, what methodology are you using to claim that? We have it. We have the documentation. We have the paper trail. It's audited, verified, and submitted. And then we're issued serialized credits on behalf of our customers, who then are the beneficiaries of those credits, which they can retire. They can try to sell them in the open market, but most of them want to retire them, to offset their Scope 3 emissions.
Okay, wow, that's amazing. I think this methodology really helped as well. Yeah, as I said, quantify. And, for the customers, always it's good to know, or not good. Maybe it's even attracting more, right? Customers, because you have this metrics in place.
100%. You have to have the processes backed by data to claim what you're saying you're doing in terms of, your environmental footprint and actually generating these credits.
Well, exactly. And even for me, like, the normal person, not the, enterprise or anything, it's like, I don't know what happens to these electronics, recycling, what it means, even recycling electronics, maybe just like smashing them, crashing, I don't know, shredding them, whatever that is. And that's it, right? But it's far more to that than
Yeah.
just putting somewhere in the bin and forgot about it.
No, yeah. I mean, shredding is a part of it. Don't get me wrong. We do have shredders in our facilities, but that just helps, when you have large volumes of material, it condenses it, and then you find a downstream solution to handle that. But most of the metals that we extract are both through manual separation and sorting and mechanical. So you will get our machinery here separates plastics and metals. So you get two different waste streams, coppers, steel, aluminum, et cetera, is all separated. And then we have bins. And what happens is we basically store it until we have enough volume to send to our downstream partner, who's going to smelt it and make it into something new. With respect to the plastics, that's the biggest challenge in our industry. That's the challenge across manufacturers in both the electronic space and every other space, really, is the challenge with recycling plastic. So right now, the most efficient solution is waste to energy, but we are working on our technology with NeoSort, which is almost complete. There's a lot of testing being done overseas in Sweden with respect to different plastic types. I get your point with respect to, people not really understanding what is electronics recycling, but everyone, most people, we'll say around the globe, have one or more electronic devices in their home. They're using them. Most people have cell phones. The industry is evolving with the regulators implementing regulations that, require manufacturers to make the devices recycle friendly, so to speak. So in Europe, with respect to the batteries having to be replaceable, an iPhone right now, you can't take it apart and change the battery. What they want you to do at Apple is they want you to buy a new phone. And they've admitted to this, which is actually pretty funny, is they kind of make your phone go a little janky and start to lag. And they have control over that. And you say, okay, well, I don't want to deal with this lag, so I'll just go get a new phone. The one thing I will say that they are doing, which is great, is they're incentivizing people to return their old devices. So they'll give them a rebate, or they'll pay them out on, or give them a store credit on their old device, if they're going to buy a new device. So I think that's great. I think a lot of manufacturers should be doing that, and we'll probably see more of that in the future. But Apple, I think, is one of a few that actually incentivize you to bring old devices back. And then they have their own recovery system implemented as well, which is great.
Yeah.
You want to see that from the manufacturers. Their biggest challenge is recovery. How do they get their devices back? So, and we see that across the industry.
So let's say I give you my laptop that needs to be recycled, right? How long does it take with the manual or if you have equipment to do that, to recycle completely?
Right now, you'd have to remove the battery first before you do any shredding. And for us, it's actually more efficient to do it manually rather than shredding, because when you shred it, yes, you can have the separation, but there's a small percentage of it that gets mixed. We want to avoid that. So you can have the casing, the glass, the boards, the battery separated, and you have a complete unit. Some of it has plastic, some of it doesn't. MacBooks are made with various metals, so that's beneficial. Or there's other options where we have, let's say you bring in a laptop that, is, let's say, a newer gen within the last 5 or 6 years. We could use some of those components on a refurbished device. where we house components like the keyboard or, the monitor. All the pieces can be separated depending on the manufacturer. So I would say, as far as timing, it could take a few minutes for our guys to just, tear apart a laptop, separate all the different components in various bins, and then you're done. You're good to go. So we have our dismantling line will have bins set up where each bin has its own material type. And so they're there dismantling, and everything gets separated and sorted by what it's composed of.
Okay, wow. That's actually very fast. They're well trained.
Yeah. And we do a lot of volume, and we'll have instances where we get a lot in and we say, okay, how quickly can we do this and how efficiently? How many guys do we need to do it? Can we just put it, in the shredder and maybe that's more efficient? So it is a case by case basis, depending on what we're receiving. And the other key component in our industry is customer requirements. What do they want to happen with these devices? Sometimes we get devices that are, in working condition, and the customer says, well, no, I don't want them reintroduced back into the market. I simply will pay for your service, but I want you to destroy everything. And we give them the best solution. We try to convince them otherwise, but it does happen. For the most part, our customers are saying, okay, well, you help us decide based on what we send you. You give us the audit of what was, deemed scrap or recycling and what, was able to be salvaged and reused and re-implemented.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting. Let's go back to the operations. So you mentioned Toronto, Brazil, Germany, Oman, and hubs across Canada and USA. How do you keep operations consistent across different regions?
Well, our first thing is we have really good managers in each of these locations. So people who are running the sites, boots on the ground. Then we have here in Toronto headquarters, we have myself and our president who manage those managers and make sure that, they're hitting targets. We have our proprietary E2MS system, which is a software that is basically distributed throughout all of our locations that we can track and manage metrics, right here in Toronto. So we can keep an eye on what's happening, keeping the line of communication open in all these regions. Oman is developing. Brazil's been developed for, probably a decade and a half now. So we have great customers there. Our hubs are collection hubs throughout Canada because we have customers from Vancouver to Quebec here in Canada. And, sometimes some of our customers, we work with big banks, they might have smaller lots, maybe a skid of laptops, et cetera. And rather than shipping them across Canada, from a sustainability perspective, it's not very efficient. So we house them in these hubs. We have multiple customers that will utilize it. And then when we have a trailer load, a full trailer, then we will organize the shipping to our main processing facility here in Toronto. So we're trying to be as efficient as possible. And then given the timeline that the customer requires too, it's case by case. But for the most part, that's why we utilize these hubs.
What region you will want to target, or you see the biggest opportunity next, region or country?
I would say probably expanding in Europe is attractive, and Japan is another market. One of our biggest markets right now in terms of industry is the electronic vapes and e-cigarettes. There are big companies that are switching to smokeless devices. We have companies or a company in Canada that utilizes our service. But I would say probably Europe expansion, which we are based in Germany. But beyond that, having other hubs would be really nice to be able to satisfy the volume in those regions. They're very strict in terms of regulation, but I think that's good for the market. And then Japan is a massive market for vape devices. And then expansion into the US greater, opening more locations would be another, target of ours. But Right now, we have a hub in Atlanta, Georgia that we utilize. That's something that we could look into in the future. But I would say the U.S. is a massive market. Yeah, those three regions I think would be ones that we'd like to target.
Okay, no, that's brilliant. So now let's talk about innovations. And so one topic you touched already, but as well in our pre-podcast call was plastics. Yeah, right? You said there is a big gap in the market around recycling plastics from
Yeah.
electronics.
Yes.
And you describe technology that uses AI, visual scanning, laser, and nanotechnology to identify what plastics are made of at a molecular level. Can you
Correct.
explain that in the simple terms for listeners?
Okay, so as simple as we can get it, you think of a conveyor system that basically has thousands of material types running through it. The technology that we're developing, called NeoSort, is an identification technology. The biggest challenge in the plastics recycling world is understanding what each piece of plastic is composed of. So you're not able to recycle it because a plastics producer needs to know what the percentages are in order to actually reuse it. So what this technology does is think of it going through a conveyor system. The AI is utilized for the database and rapid identification. The laser hits the piece of plastic as it's running through the conveyor. It scans it with the reflection of the nanotechnology that is laid on the plastic, which is a step before it goes through this. And what happens is the laser identifies, once it's scanned, what that singular piece of plastic is composed of. And then it reaches a point where there's a blower system that can separate it. So it knows, it targets that piece of plastic. And then once it gets to the blower part, it says, okay, it's made of this composition, and we could customize what we're trying to extract. So, and we can run multiple passes through it as well. So it identifies what it is, and then it separates it. So now you have a bin full of a singular type of plastic that has a ratio of X amount, a PT, et cetera, in that specific batch. And then we could go to the market or a downstreamer and say, here's what we have. We know exactly what it's composed of. What can you use it for? Here it is. Go. Instead of having to go to, waste to energy streams, et cetera, et cetera. The biggest thing is knowing what it's composed of so that they can use it and they can reintroduce it back into the supply chain or pelletize it.
So how do you think this new technology, so as I understand, you already implemented or you working on it to be implemented?
So the machine is being developed. They're doing thousands and thousands of data sets of different plastics. So earlier on, I would say about less than a year ago, we did a test with a bottle of Pepsi and a bottle of Coke. And our technology was able to identify which one was which without, telling it what it was composed of. It identified what percentages were in the Pepsi bottle and what percentage was in the Coke bottle. And you can do it with the cap, you can do it with the bottle. In our world, with the casings on some of the laptops, there's a ton of plastics that's being produced in e-waste. So we can identify it and then again, reintroduce it back into the supply chain so it can actually be recycled.
So how this new technology that you just described, how more efficient recycling will become?
The idea is to make it substantially more efficient because it's all about reintroducing these materials back to people who can reproduce them into something new, which is the definition of recycling, right? Waste to energy is one stream, but with respect to plastics, if you can, claim 100% recovery, which is what we're trying to get to for our industry, it makes it incredibly more efficient. So that's our target going forward. And there are certain metrics we want to hit. And, in our dream scenario, we partner with a big OEM, where they send us devices for recovery. We send them back their own material. They can then send it to their manufacturers who are manufacturing different components throughout, their devices. So one manufacturer might do, the keyboard plastics or the casing, et cetera, et cetera. They can then send them to those partners unless they do it themselves. And then they can claim that, this device has 100% recycled plastics material. That's our dream scenario.
And dreams will happen, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, we're working towards it. And, now with the integration of AI, it's just about doing things at scale and at a rapid pace. When you can align those two, then you have an even more efficient system. And with that integration, it's only going to get better. You'll get those recovery rates and you'll get them at speed. And that's the key is doing it as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible.
So let's talk about the lithium batteries and vapes. Why are products like vapes and lithium batteries devices are so challenging to process safely?
Well, lithium battery recycling, what we've done is we've partnered with the University of Ottawa to create a less toxic version to recover the black mass that's in lithium batteries. And we've done that. We've shown proof of concept, and now it's just integrating it into our facilities. But with respect to the vapes, every vape has a different battery in it. Some have, really cheap, manufactured in China type batteries that are extremely combustible if you're not handling them properly. So what we've developed, because we have such a big demand in that industry, is our own proprietary machinery with a partner overseas. It basically allows us to put the device on its own with the battery through a conveyor system, utilizing nitrogen so that the battery doesn't combust while you're shredding it, because that's the biggest thing with shredding batteries is it's a big no-no. But this allows us to do it. And the end product is you get whatever material the batteries are composed of as one waste stream. You might have some metals, which are, some of the casing are metal, and then you have plastics. So you have in 3 to 4 different waste streams that we end up with throughout this machine processing. But the idea is not having to remove the battery, and because you're actually able to extract the materials that are in it and then find a downstream partner for those resources.
This is a very specialized process and machines that you have to work with. So how do you decide when it's worth investing in specialized machines like that?
For this, and in general, it's all about the demand. How much volume is there? Is it worth the time and money that it takes to develop one of these machines? Do we have the volume to process? One, and how big is the market in general for this specialized machine? And both of those boxes check off, at least with respect to vape device recycling. It's a massive market. It's a massive global market. And we've tackled it in Canada. We're going to show proof of concept here. The machine is built. It's already being tested and will be fully implemented in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, that's brilliant. So let's talk about the scaling. Machinery can be one of the hardest things to scale because it's expensive, custom, and taking time to design, manufacture, test, ship, and install, right? So that's really long process, and you're working on that. So what is the hardest part of scaling recycling operations?
Like you mentioned, the cost is one. I would say that would be one of the challenges, but understanding the demand. We don't expand without knowing that there's volume there to be processed. So with scale, it's about, do you have the demand in that region to satisfy the cost that it would take to develop and operate a facility in that region. And, there are instances where, again, like I mentioned earlier, with customer demand, they'll say, okay, well, we have a region where we want you to be. And we'll say, okay, how much volume do you anticipate will be there for us to, manage, collect, and process? And they'll give us a number, and they'll say, okay, it'll be for X amount of time. And then we'll see whether or not it's worthwhile for us to make that time investment, invest in machinery, et cetera, in that specific region. And most of the time, if it is a good opportunity, we jump on it for sure.
Okay, so let's say one demand grows quickly. So what becomes the pressure point first within the operations?
Finding facilities in certain regions could be some of the pressure points, but for the most part, this industry is pretty accommodating in terms of what type of facility you need to be in. You need to have, high ceilings, racking, docking systems in place. There's a lot of security measures that go into putting up one of these facilities. Then there's certifications, which we haven't touched on. Every facility has to have its own certification. So, say we're R2B3 in Toronto, that doesn't transfer to Brazil, Oman, Germany. So each facility is being regulated and audited and certified individually. So once you get a new facility, you have to get all the certifications. All of that is a process. And then finding the manpower, skilled trades, to be able to, handle the workloads, making sure that, they have experience, background checks. Again, we're very big on security because we do handle a lot of data containing material. We work with, high level companies, Fortune 500, publicly traded companies, banks. They are very critical when it comes to security. We just got our ISO 27001 about a year and a half ago here in Toronto because one of our customers, wanted us to have that for their own chain of custody. So, again, security, facility, making sure it has the right layout, and then, sending our manpower where we need it to be to build out sites. We try to replicate our sites, Toronto being one of the most efficient. So we try to copy and paste as best as we can in these other regions.
Oh, I bet I would love to see one, with my eyes. I bet it's amazing.
We'd love to have you.
But one day, I'll come to Toronto. Now for the future. So if we're speaking again 6 months from now, right? Mm-hmm. And it has been a very successful period for ERS. What would have had to happen to be successful within the 6 months?
Well, I would say in the next 6 months, expanding our customer base is always target number one, making sure we're covering, the largest percent of the market that we can operate on. And then beyond that, with the implementation of that NeoSort technology into our processing facility here in Toronto would be, I think that's a realistic target in the next 6 months. That would be something we'd like to hit. But ultimately, again, in our industry, we are a volume-based industry. So, the more customers, the more demand that we have, the more successful ERS becomes.
Brilliant. What about, do you watch any industry shifts and how ERS International adapting or planning to adapt to some shifts particularly?
Well, right now, the biggest shift that we're seeing is the implementation of these EPR programs. I think that is something that is relatively new. And I think that big OEMs are starting to look for pros in the industry in various regions. And what I'm hearing is that, a manufacturer, a big, electronics producer will look in a region, if it has an EPR program, and they'll vet whatever pros are listed in that region, and then go with them. If you're not listed as a pro, which is a producer responsibility organization, they won't consider you. So I think that is a shift in the market that I think is going to be important for players such as ourselves, is to understand the regulation in different regions and making sure that we're satisfying it for either our own customer base or customers looking for a pro in various regions. But what we're seeing, it's not just in the Triple E space or ITTAB. It's going beyond that in blue box, tires, et cetera, where a lot of the responsibility is on the producer to make sure that their waste streams are handled. They're paying their share. Here in Ontario, they're switching from municipal backed waste collection to producer funded waste collection. So they're getting the money to go, in these communities, collect curbside, from the producers themselves. Again, the responsibility is on the producer. So, think of Coca-Cola or, Nestle or Dell, HP, et cetera. These companies are all now being regulated and making sure that they're paying their share to have it collected and processed, and then that they are partnering with the right pros to process their material on their behalf.
I see this like it should have happened a few years back, many years back.
Right? Yeah. But it's good. It's good that it's getting there. I think Europe was probably the pioneer in that, to be honest. And now, North America is kind of taking over. I know there's EPR programs being implemented in states across the US. Every province in Canada has an EPR program. And you'll see that probably in other regions as that program evolves globally. But most developed nations have, especially Europe. I don't see it too much in South America yet, but I'm sure there are. Europe and North America would probably be the two biggest markets for that. And then, I think we'll probably see a shift depending on how regulations change for collection and processing in countries and continents like Africa, where there's not a big footprint there, and there is demand, but because of how the various parts of Africa are run, it's hard to find where you could set up a facility that is safe, efficient, can be coordinated properly. I think it's still there's regions that are still too underdeveloped, or maybe it's not safe enough to be in those regions, but I know there's definitely demand there. And, the big OEMs are looking for partners in those regions. I see that being another shift. There could be some of the bigger players that end up there, as opposed to trying to collect and export, to another region or surrounding country in that area.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Now, so looking at the shifts, looking at your company's operations and all of that, I would like to ask, I love this question. So a magic wand question. So if you had a magic wand and could fix one thing in the business or the industry today, what would you fix first?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess, in our industry, fixing from an operational standpoint, I would maybe fix a couple things. The first thing is obviously with respect to recovering plastics. I think that's the biggest fix, something that we're working towards. The second thing I would say is the perception of our industry is making sure that people understand what we do and how they can contribute even on a retail basis. If I could just tell everyone in one shot, hey, go to find your local electronics recycler or municipal waste, go there, drop these off. That would probably be the biggest thing that I would say would have the most impact in our industry, is just really getting the message out there and educating people on what to do with their end-of-life devices.
Perfect. So I have a last question, and this will be directed to maybe consumers as well. So what is the biggest opportunity in electronics recycling that most people outside the industry do not see yet?
That's another great question. For us, it's all about capturing market share, as an opportunity for our business. And if I'm looking at it from that perspective, it's marketing yourself, networking, making sure that you're making the right contacts, getting people educated. I will say, for us, it's getting ourselves visible in the market. There are a lot of smaller companies that are out there, making sure that if you are choosing a partner, that you're vetting them, making sure they have the right certifications, doing your due diligence to understand that, when they are taking on your volume of material, that they're actually handling it according to those regulations and not, allowing anything to go to landfill or being handled improperly.
And I hope listeners as well to find it informative. Everyone, each of us can contribute
Yes.
helping recycling.
Yes. And, we're doing an e-waste drive this weekend here in Toronto. It's actually at my daughter's school, which is really cool. We got to partner with the school and publicized it. We're marketing it to staff and student parents and so on for them to bring devices that they have sitting in their home. We're going to come with a truck and kind of be a part of their Mayfair so that they can come drop off old electronics. And, the more of that we do, the bigger impact we'll have at least on the community level, which I think is, it's a lot of fun.
Right, exactly. It's very simple, right? It's so simple. Just take your electronics to one place, drop it, and that's all what needs to be done, right?
There you
simple.
go. Exactly. It's simple. Again, it's all about knowledge. You got to know, you got to teach people what to do. And we continue to do our best to get the message out, at least in the regions that we operate in and maybe that we're potentially expanding to. But I love this industry. I'm passionate about it. ERS is making an impact, and that's important to us. And, it helps the business. It helps our partners, transparency in chain of custody and providing the best service possible and the best solutions, both on sustainability and efficiency, recovery and lifecycle extension as a whole.
Brilliant. Well, a big thank you to you, Joseph, from ERS International for sharing this perspective of electronic recycling, circular system, plastic recovery, carbon credits, and future of e-waste. If you enjoyed this conversation, follow the show for more discussion with leaders shaping the next generation of environmental companies. Until next time, keep building the future.